it's great to be here. I do agree with Elizabeth that this is an important topic. And actually, when Elizabeth and I were planning this session, I thought it might be a good idea if we actually had a dispute that we could resolve for you live on screen. But unfortunately, it turned out that both of us, with a common goal and the fact that we're just too nice, it wasn't possible to generate a conflict. But don't worry, you'll have plenty of opportunity to discuss conflicts in various forms. And I'm sure that your experience of Toastmasters is that there are very few conflicts. And because when I'd been a Toastmaster for quite some time, and the idea that there could be disagreements or even more serious conflicts or disputes was strange to me. But you know, wherever there are human beings, the potential for dispute and conflict is there. And I'm sure you have been in Toastmasters for a number of years. You will have come across situations that were difficult to resolve. I would just like to, I'm not sure exactly how many people we have on the call, but it would be interesting if you could just put in the chat whether you have a leadership position within Toastmasters, either at club level, area, or division, or my goodness me, even district. Just a yes if you have a leadership position, or no if you are not a Toastmaster or just a regular member. And we'll get a feel for, well, I'm getting a feel that this is a group, this is a meeting of leaders. So that in itself is very interesting. So we'll just let a few of those responses come through. And of course, as leaders, which it seems the majority are, you have a particular responsibility for the happy running of your club or your area or your division, because Toastmasters is not our jobs. So we, as well as going there to learn, we're also going there to enjoy ourselves. So I think that is a responsibility on all of us to try and make sure that happens. Now,
Gerry, reading the chat for you, that there's leadership
at
club level, area, division, district. So assume you've got the whole range of leadership in the room tonight.
Well, absolutely. So we're covering the whole spectrum. So that is very important. And these are the people for whom dispute and conflict resolution are particularly important. And I'm sure that you know that this is allowed for. If you've consulted the Toastmasters International website, you'll know that there are procedures for conflict resolution. In fact, when I consulted it, I was shocked to see there is actually a 29-step procedure for the escalation of disputes. So I think I am here to tell you that the moment that you start to escalate that dispute, that is a failure. That's a failure, and particularly given the fact that we are in a team of leaders here. When you start taking the steps of escalation, there are things that cannot be repaired at that stage. So, and my background in this area is that I have been a volunteer mediator at Edinburgh Sheriff Court for the last 8 years. That would be the county court in England, or I think in Ireland that would be the circuit court. So we're not talking about criminal offences here, but local disputes. In our case, it was disputes up to the value of £5,000, but often it wasn't just the money. And our disincentive, if you like, or incentive for the disputees to come to an agreement was that once the dispute went back to the court, it was out of their hands. The judge would make a decision, and then they would have to live with that decision. Whereas what we were offering was that they could come to an agreement themselves, and it was actually in their power to do that. And when Elizabeth and I were discussing this meeting, we wondered whether we could find some parallels within Toastmasters to act as an incentive to resolve these disputes. So and I wonder, with all your experience, because I wonder how many combined years of experience we have in the room tonight, you would like to put in the chat, and this is not Las Vegas, so please anonymize any experiences you may have had. We're only interested in the general idea of how disputes can arise, but in 1 or 2 words, would you like to put in the chat the sorts of things that cause disputes or conflicts among members in your own wide experience? So well, if we put that and take a couple of minutes to put that in the chat, we'll see the kind of things that can come up. Yes, I see Martin there, clash of personalities. A lot of personality. Oh, formal wear or casual wear at the top table. That's an interesting one. Bit of a black and white. Power struggles, yes, absolutely. Many different. Of course, there are many different issues, and yeah, so a lot of personalities. So this comes back to the point I was saying that wherever you get human beings together, the potential is there for 2 or more of them not to get on. Well, I don't know whether it's good news or bad news that so many of you have got experiences of disputes, but what it does do is highlight the fact that it's something that we should be forewarned about, or indeed, hopefully tonight, forearmed about. So that's all very interesting. I don't know, Elizabeth, if you can give us a quick summary of that.
Yes, I would love to. As you said, it's a lot of it is about personality clashes. I think an important one is cultural misunderstanding. I think that can be huge. And I think another major one is power struggles. Members treating the club as though it's their fiefdom, just people having different personalities and so on. So I think there's a lot. Basically, what you mentioned at the beginning is humans being together, human interaction. There's going to be some kind of conflict.
Yeah.
Doesn't think is how we handle, and that's why we're delighted to have you tonight to give us some strategies to handle those conflicts.
Well, I guess and I know that Toastmasters International say that one of the causes of disputes is that members feel that other members, or perhaps their leaders, have not been living up to the values of Toastmasters. Now, I'm just going to share my screen at the moment. So you would think all Toastmasters, when they join, they do sign up to Toastmasters core values. And I don't know, I know they're not always in this order, but I like to think of respect, integrity, service, and excellence, simply because the initials are RISE and it's easier to remember. You would think that if every Toastmaster did keep those values in mind, it would be very difficult to fall into a dispute. But I can easily understand that some people might, for example, think that excellence was the most important thing. So a highly driven president might think that the important thing was that the club always got 10 points and was to the forefront, and the support and the service to the members could take second place, or perhaps the service to some members, so that members might then feel neglected. And although we all sign up to the idea of respect, again, there may be people who believe that some forms of respect are more important than others. So the I think the Toastmasters core values should be an insurance policy, but in fact, in some ways, they may be the source of the dispute because they can be interpreted in different ways. But what we would like to do now is put the issue back to yourselves. And Elizabeth and I have come up with 4 scenarios that we believe you could easily discover at some level in a club. Now, it doesn't by any means cover all the areas that you could find, but what we'd like you to do is Liz will randomly allocate you to one of 4 rooms, and let me just tell you what the scenarios would be. So I will, we don't have to keep this a secret. Just bear with me a second. So you may or may not get one of these, but everybody will get one of them. So let's say you have a new Toastmaster who's over familiar, over friendly, and makes the female members in the club feel uncomfortable with his familiarity. Okay, that's number 1. Another scenario is we have a member, perhaps an experienced member, who has spent his or her own money to buy some assets for the club, which he or she thinks will improve the club. Unfortunately, they haven't consulted their fellow officers and they haven't agreed to pay the money. So that's number 2. Number 3 is somebody who has founded the club, perhaps started the club off their own bat and grown the club and believes that the club is her or his fiefdom. And anyone, so it's my way or the highway. You know, I've made this club what it is. But that doesn't suit everybody. Somebody wants to challenge that, or other people might have tried to challenge it and want to leave. And that's 3. And the 4th one is a club which is a long-established club, and they still regret the passing of the legacy education program, and the senior members of the club haven't fully embraced Pathways. But some new members realize that Pathways is the only game in town, and they're not happy with this scenario. So you'll have one of these to deal with, and Elizabeth and I will go through the rooms. So breakout room number 1, you'll have an over-friendly Toastmaster. Number 2, a member or an officer has spent his or her own money without consulting the fellow officers, and then we have a financial dispute. Room number 3, we have the long-established founding president who made the club what it is, but treats it as if it was their own. And number 4, the long-established committee is refusing to embrace the Pathways program. Okay, Liz, do you want to allocate people?
How long are you going to give them, Gerry? How long do you want people to spend on the exercise?
I think, well, how are we doing for time? Could we say, because we finish at 15:15, do we?
We finish at 30:30.
Finish at 30:30. So then can we take 15 minutes for this?
Yeah, that seems about right. And then when they come back, they're feeding back. Yeah, each group will feed back when they come back.
Each group. So if you could nominate a spokesperson for your group, then it'll be fascinating to hear what we come back with.
Gerry, we have 5 breakouts with your numbers. So do you want to give the room another? Okay,
room number 5 also has the over-familiar Toastmaster.
Okay, right. I will now open the breakout rooms, and you're all randomly going in. See you soon. There'll just be a couple of people still waiting to go. So Paul, I'll just allocate you to I think room number 4. Okay, 1 minute. Right. Sorry, how much time have they got?
They've got 15 minutes, isn't it, Gerry?
Yeah, 15 minutes.
Okay, and Liz, can we choose where we want to go?
Yeah, so you can go in and out of rooms as you wish.
Okay, do we have to come back to the main room to go back to another room?
Probably.
Yeah, okay, no problem. I think Mary has Mary joined the group?
No, I haven't put Mary in either because you were all co-hosts, so I had to not allocate the co-hosts, basically. So,
so we can choose.
Mary, do you want to choose one or do you want to hop around? You're on mute.
Okay, I'm going to go into mute. Gerry, where are you going? I'll go into room 1.
Okay, well, I'll go to room 5 and work my way back, and maybe we'll meet. Maybe we'll meet in the middle, Elizabeth. That seems like a compromise.
Yeah, we don't have that many minutes, so yeah.
Put me in room 3, please, Liz.
Okay.
All right, then room 3 will do. So, Gerry, you okay to jump around?
Yes. So I just come back.
Yeah, just come back, choose your room, and then go. Mary, you want to go to room 5? Just 1 minute.
No, I'm room 3.
Mary's in room 3, I think.
3, sorry. Good one. Off you go. I'll just reallocate Martin. Let me just pause this recording.
This meeting is being recorded.
My goodness. Well, we just got the information twice. So we had 4 scenarios, 5 groups. So we have 2 groups that are contemplating the same scenario. So let's have breakout room 1. Who's the spokesperson for breakout room 1?
I nominate Marie.
Thank you. It's just by coincidence we had that exact scenario in a club I was a member of about 10 years ago. A married couple joined the club, and they were kind of an older couple, and from day one the guy was a bit tricky and suggestive comments and that kind of thing, but it culminated then when he gave a speech. And it's a PowerPoint presentation actually, and some of the photographs are absolutely outrageous. And I would say the content of the speech as well was racist, sexist, lots of politics, lots of slurs on different religions. Just the whole, you couldn't believe how bad it was. So anyway, at the end of the meeting, there were 5 of us there from the committee, and we held back at the end of the meeting. We discussed what we would have to do because it was totally unacceptable and really upset a lot of members in the club. So we came together, had a meeting, came up with a script, and then the president approached the person and said, "You are not getting any more chances. If there are any more blows or if anything else untoward happens after this speech, you're a goner." And luckily he did something else and he was a goner. So the couple left, but really under a dark cloud. And it was the only time I've ever seen it in Toastmasters. It was very upsetting, but it was a great learning experience as well for the rest of us.
So Marie, just a quick question about that. When the president spoke to the individual, did they say, "Oh, I'm really, really sorry, I didn't realize it would give offense"?
He was so funny. Well, the president was a pristine person. He was from Poland, and such an amazing sense of excellence in his service. So we totally believed what he said, and he came back and said the guy didn't see any problem with it whatsoever, didn't know what he was talking about. What's the problem? No remorse.
Okay, so I'm surprised you gave him one more chance actually, but
well, it was a situation like he didn't kick him out there and then, because I guess he'd never been approached before about his behavior. So I suppose you always have to give a person, it was a verbal warning, and he was left in no doubt that if he did it again, out the door. And I think it was in a table topics once again, he said something ridiculous. So that was it. He was
So,
gone.
so that was that particular, not so much a scenario as an actual chain of events. But so, anything else from the group about that scenario? Is that the way you would handle it again next time, or?
Yeah, well, I was saying to the group that when I was working in a leadership position in the bank, we had developed this kind of process for dealing with conflict. It was called the BACA process, and it's behavior, outcome, consequence, and action. So when you approach somebody, you tell them what the behavior was that is causing the trouble, and then you say what the outcome was, what impact it had on the members. And the consequence of that was in turn a big impact on the entire club. And then you have to describe the action you want from them going forward in order to improve the situation. So that you have 4 sentences really clearly laid out, take the emotion out of it, and just let them in no doubt of what the future is.
All right. Well, I'm in no doubt we have to move on because Liz is giving us the red card. So let's go on to room 2. Financial irregularity. Who do we have from room 2?
Yes, well, I've volunteered. I don't know whether I should be able to sum up exactly what was said, but we decided it was a matter of the important thing was the group. So if this person who bought something for the group, whatever their motive was, whatever it was, they should have consulted the group first, which is the Toastmaster Club or the committee, and not gone off as an individual and done something and bought something for the club and then expected the club to pay for it, because that doesn't respect the club.
Yeah.
But we also thought that we should speak to this individual who had stepped out and done this, say, all right, very generous, but you know, they're part of the club and they can't go off doing things as an individual in that, so that we respect the club. And
well, I suppose then the next stage would be that the individual's response to that, whether it was how dare you or I'm really, really sorry.
yes, now that's the tricky one, isn't it? Because that has to be resolved. You want to keep perhaps this member as a good member, long-time member, and you know, all their heart and soul is in that Toastmaster Club. So you have to explain somehow that and keep them on board. It's by speaking to them respectfully, of course, and somehow turning their attitude round, their mind round, so that they can still have good faith in the group and still remain in the club and actually back down from what they've done, understand that that was out of order, not part of the club ethic, and still, you know, be at peace with all of that.
Well, that to me that does make perfect sense. That, of course, is the absolute challenge of conflict resolution, that when somebody has stepped over a line, it may be clear to everyone except the individual. But I think that sounds like a very good strategy. So is that it, Rachel? That's great. Thank you very much.
I hope so.
So we'll move on now to our third scenario, and this is the scenario in room 3, where you've got the let's say the dominant founder president. And so do we have a spokesperson for room 3?
Tony Wilkins.
Tony, thank you, Tony.
It was interesting, at the very outset you said escalating a dispute was a failure. And when my group started to speak, everybody focused on conciliation and an attempt to resolve it with the president in a very respectful way. And the fourth suggestion was immediately acknowledge his or her contribution to that date, but to then emphasize that the club was all inclusive about all and not just an individual. There was one suggestion of focused on a particular word, and that was diversification, or to diversify, but to include him in where the group should be going, the club should be going. But it was all inclusive with him. There's no question of exclusion or confrontation, all conciliatory, to say the least. It was interesting that Mairead said earlier on, the Baca approach, that's more or less what we came up with, but not focusing exclusively on that terminology. But it's the committee serving the membership ultimately, and not vice versa, and the need for the group as a whole to grow. It may take time over a few meetings, but obviously there's a limit, and this is where we cut out of the meeting. What happens if he doesn't change, he or she doesn't change, or doesn't move off their pedestal? That was a point that we didn't really get beyond, but certainly a very conciliatory approach to him, an all-inclusive approach to try and resolve it.
Quite often in these clubs where you get a very dominant personality who's also very hardworking for the club, in some cases the members are happy to let that president carry on and do so much of the work. Of course, that is not actually healthy for the club, because it's for everyone to grow and not just for it to be a hobby. But that, again, sounds like there were a lot of good ideas. And once again, the key to it will be how that founder, dominant president reacted to that, whether they saw it as a challenge or could see the good sense in it. So that might have been the challenge. And now we go on to our fourth scenario, which was the club that didn't want to, or sorry, the little group of senior members that didn't want to embrace pathways. And I spent a little time with this group, and I thought that there'd be very few Toastmasters that would stop people from doing pathways projects, but you may get a situation where there just wasn't the enthusiasm, and so a little bit subtle, or perhaps they would continue to offer the legacy projects because that's what they were comfortable with, or didn't fully believe in pathways. So I'd be very interested to hear from our spokesman from Group 4.
Yeah, so that's me, Justin.
Hi, Justin.
So I just want to thank the members in that group. I think they made some very good suggestions. So Maura, Julia, Paul and Anne, thank you so much indeed for your comments and support. So in terms of the scenario, we approached it from two different perspectives. The quickest one just to mention is that if one of those senior Toastmaster members happens to be on the committee, then of course it needs to be dealt with by the committee, because they are representing Toastmasters on the club, and it may need to be addressed by the president. Ideally, my own personal view is that the committee itself tries to persuade the person to change their viewpoint, or at least to express the official line of Toastmasters, which is that Pathways is the educational path for its club and for the organization as a whole. The more common scenario, as you said, Gerry, is that there are more experienced members that don't believe Pathways offers the best opportunity. They believe in the old educational track, pathway track. Some really good comments here in terms of, well, first of all, have a private word with them to find out if there's any underlying reason why they may be voicing these concerns. We be mindful of the fact that actually Pathways is an online tool that they need to use. Maybe people would be not so comfortable in doing that because they would have traditionally just had manuals in which they work from. Or there could be some other underlying disquietness that they have that may not be related to the particular topic. We need to be mindful that members themselves, is a matter of free speech. But if it is disrupting the club, then of course maybe one option is to ask them to actually meet with the committee to express their views. being listened to is probably the first path of reconciliation. It could be the best way to diffuse the situation. The other way as well, I would say, is to promote pathways. Get more people doing the pathways, doing the pathways speeches, doing educational sessions, so people become more familiar with the online tool. So in the long term, what these people realize that things have moved on and that they see the value of this particular pathways program that Toastmasters has. That's a summary of it, Gerry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Justin. A lot of terrific ideas there for what is, I'm guessing, could be quite a familiar scenario, but one that does need to be addressed. And now we're going back to our first scenario, to room 5, and this will be in more levels than one familiar, because this is the one that dealt with the over-familiar new member. Otherwise good, but making some of the members uncomfortable. So who is our spokesman from room 5? Nuala. Yes,
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be you, Nuala.
Yeah. Well, a couple of people in the group had experience. One person talked about how somebody had to be asked to leave a group. Another person talked about going to a meeting nearly pre-prepared because they had heard stories about this particular person, and of course he did engage and his language was inappropriate to 2 women, and she immediately was able to say to him that are you speaking to me, sort of thing, this really doesn't go on in our club, and then didn't engage and walked off. But when we get into the discussion of it, like what would be a positive outcome for this, we sort of felt that initially that it needed to be addressed at, say, president level as an overall thing within the club, maybe reviewing the core values, and especially the one of respect, and maybe demonstrating or talking about that at a global level within the club. And then if the issue didn't subside, that it would need to be dealt with directly with the person, referring to what was said at the global level and then your behavior and linking the two together, and then move it on from there. I don't know, I hope that has sort of, but we felt it had to come from the top, that it needed to be something. But in order for that to happen, there needs to be an atmosphere within the club that somebody would actually report this, because this isn't always overt. It isn't always seen by every member in the club, and so it's quite often a person who does this knows who they're doing it on, that it can be that. And then that led us on to the whole thing of table topics even, and just needing to be careful about the table topics that we give, and we don't know what's going on in a person's life. And so that sort of brought us into another sort of can of worms. But yeah, we felt that this issue needed really to be addressed globally first, rather than be controlling, and just set it out there because somebody's new to the club. They don't really know what goes on, and then give them the benefit of the doubt, but give it out at a broad level. And if it's not changing, then bring it in to personal level. Thank you.
No, thank you, Nuala. And could I ask you all just to show your appreciation for all the groups and all our spokespeople, because I thought that was absolutely fascinating. And so thanks to all the groups and all the spokespeople for coming back. And I'll tell you what I really appreciated about them, that I thought that all the groups seemed to grasp that even though something might appear to be black and white on the surface, there's always a bit of nuance, and sometimes digging a bit deeper will provide results. So I thought all of those scenarios were interesting, and I thought your handling of them was particularly interesting. But if you would like to, I think we still have a little bit of time, and I just wanted to share with you some of the experience that I've had as a mediator. Let's see if I can share my screen here. So you see that? That's working okay. Great. So we've had the Toastmasters values, and although they should be just a help, their interpretation could itself lead to problems. Now, So there's some things about the mediation that are worthy of note. The success rate. So in my experience, the cases are referred by the sheriff, who's the judge, to the mediation service, and then the people in dispute work with the mediator, and if they can resolve the dispute themselves, that is recorded, and that is a legally binding agreement. If they can't come to an agreement, it simply goes back to the court, and the judge will make a determination, and the parties have to accept that. One of the things that I've got a lot of satisfaction from mediation, and certainly at the Edinburgh Sheriff Court, the success of mediations is 80%. So 80% of the cases that come that were active enough for the participants to be prepared to go to court over, and in financial terms up to the value of £5,000, but sometimes with a personal element as well, 80% of these are resolved. And if they are resolved, then the relationship between the parties, if one existed, sometimes of course it's an individual and companies, but often you get neighbours or family members, and if the dispute is successfully resolved, then the relationship survives. If the dispute goes back to the court, the relationship never survives. And that was really behind what I said about a failure. Once you escalate it, one party is going to be unhappy. At least one party is going to be unhappy. So when we have a mediation, this is the model that we always follow. So the mediator has no relationship with either party. So that is perhaps going to be difficult to achieve in a club. But when we have the parties, we obviously all introduce ourselves, and a key point that we establish at the beginning is whether both parties to the conflict or the dispute want to resolve it, because sometimes somebody will just go through the motions and they're not fully sincere about wanting to resolve it. So you have to accept, although notwithstanding what I said earlier on, if one party does not really want to reach a solution, then you have to let things take their course. So we have the introductions, and when we do that, each party gets 5 minutes to state their case or say how they feel about the situation without interruption. And what we're trying to do there is build a rapport between the parties, either because they don't know each other or because they have been at loggerheads, and that's why they're in dispute. So we're trying to build a rapport between the parties, and now that they've stated their case, then we try and identify the issues, try and tease out the issues. So I think it came out in some of the reports from the spokespeople that there can be other things underlying a state of conflict, perhaps a previous dispute or something else that one member is unhappy with. That might be particularly relevant when you get something that just seems to be a clash of personalities. So I know that when I was quite new to this, if we appeared to get the parties to a position where they were prepared to sign something, an experienced mediator would say, let's go over this again. Are you sure you're happy with this? Are you happy to commit to that? And I would be thinking, they're ready to sign. Why are you trying to open up the wounds? But in fact, the important thing is that whatever is underlying this conflict is better to be brought out. So identifying the issues is a key part of the process. And once you've done that, you can explore them further and see whether there is any common ground. And, I think you'll have gathered by now, whereas you think that it can only be a win-lose situation, sometimes the dispute is about different things than are apparent at the very beginning. So the exploring of the issues is how we might come to a way forward for both sides here. And those are the options that we can consider. And perhaps if things are not going well, and quite often in a mediation there's a a low point where it feels that everything's on the point of breaking down, and somehow a way through is found. And the last one, which may come as a surprise, and I don't see why this wouldn't work at Toastmasters, you write down what you've agreed. So perhaps in the case, especially in the rooms 1 and 5, where somebody has exhibited inappropriate behavior, you actually get them to commit not to repeat it in the future. I do appreciate in one case, at least, they were given a final warning, but this is about really committing to that. And obviously in room 1's case, I think that was that Mairead, the person involved was not really committed. So the recording of the agreement, but of course in mediation, it is a legal operation, so that is what's necessary to form the basis of the legal agreement. So I think that, because Elizabeth said what we want to try and have some takeaways from this, and I think I would say 3 things are important. One is, don't let it fester. I'll stop my share at the moment so that we can. Don't let the situation fester. As soon as it becomes apparent that there is a problem, find a way to get that aired and start the process of resolution. And that will make it less likely that you have to escalate it. The second point is, in spite of what I said earlier, if one of the parties does not want to change, and in a couple of the scenarios it was clear they didn't want to change, then you have to accept, sometimes you have to accept failure, because people have to want to get this resolved, or else the problem will just reoccur later on. What I would say is, if you think it's a victory to get somebody to leave the club, that might not resolve it. They might join another club. If they're a real troublemaker, it might cause a problem elsewhere. So, just getting it off your plate is not necessarily a solution for Toastmasters as a whole. And finally, I know that we're not, as far as I know, District 71 is not going to embark on a program of training mediators. But if people are too close to the problem, don't be afraid to ask for help. If you can find somebody, particularly in the world of Zoom that we're in now, it may be easier to find somebody who has no skin in the game, because an important point about mediation, so this is not true mediation, but somebody who can come into the situation as a new voice with no axe to grind at all might be able to support you, again, assuming both parties want to get it resolved.